I can't make a loud intro right now, but what's up, everybody? Damn, y'all looking fine today. It's your boy, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we gotta break down the top 8 guns to dominate Act 2 and give you tips and tricks over everything that you need to know before you take these guns into your games so you can get high impact, carry your trash teammates, and climb as a result. But go to the Game Loop website for in-depth advanced mechanical courses, weapon guides. We got so much content on the Game Loop website. You got to do yourself a favor. Go check it out right now before it's too late. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now we got to break it down with the first 2 guns on the list, which of course is the guns you're going to be using more than anything else, and it's the Vandal versus the Phantom. Now we're not going to really break down which one you should choose because there is not one you should choose. Honestly, the Vandal versus the Phantom is going to be based on what you plan to do and what you're feeling in that given day, as both of these guns are going to be viable. I will say that in general, the Vandal is far more punishing for any sort of gunplay fundamental mistakes. So if you're feeling pretty bad that day, you're not feeling on point, a lot of times the Phantom is going to be far more forgiving. Now that being said, typically the best thing that you could actually be doing is not just one-tricking a gun, using a gun depending on what you're planning on doing in that given round. You're trying to take a long aim duel mid and you want to aggressively challenge somebody. Vandal might be your best bet because of that one-tap capability, and you will actually 100% kill them from the furthest range. Maybe you plan to do some lurking, or maybe you are holding a point as a controller. When enemies try to push on, you're going to smoke it off and you're going to spray through smoke. Then the Phantom is probably far better in that environment. You got to think about what you're going to be doing with the guns before you decide which one to pick, and maybe some rounds you're going to pick the Vandal, and some rounds you're going to pick the Phantom, and typically it is in your best interest to practice both guns, because you never know if you're going to pick up one of these guns on the battlefield. Yes, you could hypothetically just only buy the Vandal, but there will be many times where you end up with the Phantom, and you need to be confident in both guns. And honestly, both of these guns have strengths and weaknesses that you might want to take into an individual round that you plan to make a certain play with that style. So just keep that in mind, and I think you're going to do great going forward. Now moving on to the next weapon that I got to talk about this act, and it's the Operator. Now, the Operator is a weapon that I typically tout should be mainly used by Jet, but it can be used by other people on defense in this specific scenario. You see, there's 2 predominant types of play that happen in ranked. There's the aggressive rushes, that probably happens the most amount, but there is also the extremely passive teams where they just play in default for a really long amount of time. Now, I think that the reason that these are the 2 predominant strategies in ranked is because they're simple. It's like, hey, let's rush, or hey, let's play passive. And that's pretty much all that happens in ranked on average, especially for the majority of ranks. That's just what happens. But the Operator is extremely good when you're up against non-rush opponents. When you're up against rush opponents, a lot of times they'll use a lot of utility. They'll flash every corner. They'll rush in. They'll go fast. It's really punishing for missing. Sometimes you won't even get a chance to take that shot, and that can be pretty bad for an Operator. But when the enemy is playing really slow, when they are playing default, when they're trying to bait out utility, when they're trying to gather information, the Operator can be an unparalleled weapon because they do not get to just peek sidelines for free without using utility if you're just posted up somewhere with an Operator. That's why typically on defense, I would try to get a read on what the enemy team is doing. And if you and your team are putting all your resources into stopping a rush, eventually the enemies are going to stop rushing. They're going to start playing more passive. They're going to default to that default play, and an Operator can kind of punish them for doing that as well. And that's why every single person should be at least competent with an Operator, because you never know when it might be the perfect gun for the situation to shut down an enemy's strategy. Now moving on to your favorite weapon, undoubtedly it just feels so satisfying to kill with this weapon and get killed with this weapon. I mean, it's the Bucky, right? But all joking aside, the Bucky is a phenomenal weapon right now. The thing is, the alternate fire, that convergent fire of the Bucky can one-shot pretty easily if you set up the proper range, and in a very similar way that you post up with an Operator, you can post up on a lot of angles with the Bucky on defense and basically get to one-tap anyone who slow peeks that angle. Unless they freaking Ferrari peek it, they're dying, and even sometimes if they do that, they're still gonna die. Now, the optimal range for a Bucky alternate fire is between 8 and 15 meters, with 12 being that perfect sweet spot, but honestly, you can one-shot anywhere between 8 and 15. Now, in order to get used to that meters, what I would highly suggest you do is practice pinging a corner and standing in that optimal distance. So if an enemy peeks that, you get that right click off, and you want to make sure that you're standing near cover so that you can instantly right click, potentially get a kill, and then dip out. Now, typically where you want to aim is actually about neck level because of the spread. You can get some on the head, some down below, but that's where you're going to get the maximum amount of actual pellets in the enemy. Now, if you are not playing around like a natural cover ledge that you can jiggle behind, you can be playing along a wall where essentially what you're doing is you're slicing the pie backwards. Instead of peeking an enemy aggressively with the Bucky, you're holding one angle, an enemy swings out, you alternate fire them with the Bucky and kill them, and then you slice the pie backwards and then hold another angle. So if another enemy swings, then you get to right click that person and you just keep slicing the pie backwards, holding that angle and shutting down any person that just wants to wide swing you, because typically a lot of times people will just multi-swing a Bucky and try to kill you in that little downtime period between your shots. Now move on to another weapon that's freaking nuts in this act right now. Ever since it's buff, this weapon is phenomenal, and it's the Marshal. Now, because of the movement speed while you're zooming in, a quick peek with the scope out on the Marshal, it's actually freaking nuts. You're like a goddamn Tesla going 0 to 90 in like 1.6 seconds. Now, of course, it's gonna take some getting used to when compared to the operator, because you're gonna be aiming head level, but with enough practicing the Marshal just in a deathmatch environment or up against training bots, you're gonna get a lot better at it very quickly. You just gotta make sure to adjust your crosshair placement. Now, an amazing thing about this quick peek style strategy is that when people are holding angles with Vandals or operators, Marshals can just absolutely shit on them. And that's why this gun is really a gun that is worth getting good at, because for a low 1,000 credits, you can actually counter an operator at 5,000 credits, which is freaking nuts. Now, typically, you're gonna have to pre-aim, you're gonna have to know where enemies typically hold, and you're gonna have to swing that angle freaking fast as hell, because that's the only way that an opper is going to actually miss that shot. So definitely keep that in mind, but because of this quick peeking power, Marshals can actually threaten operators when Marshals are on attack and an operator's on defense, which is really nuts for such a cheap weapon. On top of that, when you're holding on defense, just getting a body shot and then backing away from the angle is typically good enough, because you can get another body shot later on, or you can finish them off with a pistol, or you basically just get to get free damage with very little risk, especially on some of those eco rounds. So that's just something to keep in mind. But typically, Marshal actually plays better up against non-rush weapons. When enemies are counter-strafing and holding angles with like Vandals and operators, it's gonna be better than when an enemy is running with a freaking Stinger. So that is important for you to know, and that's just because it's more difficult to hit the shots on people that are running and moving very quickly rather than just being posted up. Now, the last thing that you gotta remember with the Marshal is that crouching makes you nearly perfectly accurate. So in a pinch, if enemies are rushing you, you can body shot someone very, very easily for that 101. Now we'll go to the next weapon that we got to talk about is the Ghost Pistol, which is probably the most used pistol now. The Frenzy is not really seeing that much play anymore. Yeah, the Classic and the Ghost are like fighting for that 50-50 time slot. Now, because you're going to be going up against Classics a lot, you got to make sure to stay out of the effective right-click area of that Classic. Outside of 10 meters, if you're outside of that range, it's going to be a lot harder for you to take multiple pellets by a Classic right-click. And another thing that a lot of people need to be doing on the Ghost is being light on their toes. Ghost is very forgiving for moving. It's very forgiving for running and gunning almost. And with slight counter strafing, you're gonna hit a majority of your shots. You need to also make sure that you're highly mobile. Try not to crouch unless you're only gonna need one shot in the body to kill 100%. And typically, crouching is not the way to go on Ghost Pistols. You wanna keep that mobility, make it so you're a lot harder to hit rather than being stationary, because it's gonna be really easy for someone to headshot you if you're crouched and stationary when they have a Ghost. Now, the last thing that you need to do a lot more, and people just need to do a lot more in general, utilize that silenced aspect of the Ghost and spray a lot through smokes. Being able to do a little bit of damage in pistol round is worth a lot more than other rounds, because let's say someone has armor and you just do enough through that smoke to break off their armor. Now they died in one headshot, and that is really, really solid value that you can get just by spamming here or there through smokes with a Ghost. And a lot of people like to push through smokes on pistol round because they're not punished in the same way that they are up against phantoms, but you could punish them. Just spam head level. You're gonna get a lot of damage and maybe even kills that way. Now moving to the next weapon that I really need to break down. It got a huge nerf, but it's still freaking nuts, and people are underestimating this gun, and it's the Stinger. You know, Stinger is still really strong, and on attack, it is typically gonna be better than something like a Bucky. Unfortunately, it's a lot harder to control the distance when you're on attack with the Bucky, and while it still can be viable, it's not gonna be as reliable as something like a Stinger, especially if you're trying trying to aggressively take some sort of space, like U-Haul, you're trying to aggressively take garage, or whatever the case may be. Now, that being said, this weapon is a lot weaker from those long distances. It's gonna be more difficult for you to just dink people from like across the entire point like you used to be able to. So you gotta be thinking about where you're gonna route as an attacker before you buy the Stinger. If you plan to dash somewhere aggressively, flash into garage, or do anything that is gonna put you in a very close effective range onto the enemy, Stinger might be your best bet, because if you get an enemy off guard or you catch them when they're mistimed rushing in a really close area, you can just rack up the kills, or you get to trade up for a much better gun out of nowhere. Now, the last weapon that we gotta talk about in this video is none other than the Sheriff, which is a weapon that has extremely high upside, but it can be very difficult to use. One thing that a lot of people need to do with the Sheriff more is utilize the fact that it has high penetration, wall bang a lot, clear everything you possibly can, and aim head level. First aim at head level, maybe if they're standing up, and then maybe if they're crouching, and just try to fish and clear a lot of these areas, because you can hit someone in the head and kill them with the Sheriff just like that. Now, unfortunately, with the Sheriff, getting body shots is not gonna kill someone quick enough. If someone has a rifle and you just hit them in the body, they're gonna be able to kill you, not even hitting headshots on you. If you go body, you're still gonna die. You're not gonna be able to get those 3 shots off. So there's 2 ways that you can play around this. The first way is by jiggle peeking angles and doing damage while being mobile. You jiggle peek, counter straight, get a shot off, and then you're gone, right? So you can do a little bit of damage and you're not full committing to anything, and you're not gonna give that enemy time to spray you down. But the best way is just to get a freaking headshot, but it requires a very high level of gunplay fundamentals. That being said, almost more than any other gun, the Sheriff is a gun that you should really be practicing in training and in deathmatch. And it's one of those guns that actually works on your fundamentals for every other gun. So I think it's a good weapon to put in your training. Let's say you run like 2 or 3 death matches with a rifle. Make sure that you plop in a Sheriff in there towards the end. Get a little bit of Sheriff practice every single time. Because if you get really competent with this gun, you have the capability of carrying some rounds that on paper you have just no business winning. Seriously, you can get 1 or 2 kills with the Sheriff just with good crosshair placement, catch enemies off guard, insta-kill them. You get to upgrade your gun and you get to kill someone for such a low investment. I know, sometimes rocking things like a Stinger or a Bucky just feel easier, right? But they're not gonna make you a better player, and the ceiling is actually not as high as something like a Sheriff. So even if it can be a little bit difficult, try to incorporate Sheriff play in your average game. But go to the Game League website in the links down below for high quality guides, tips and tricks, map courses, agent courses. We got so much damn content on the Game League website that you will never run out of high quality things that you can use to climb the ranks of Valorant. So do yourself a favor, go check it out right now in the links down below. But thanks so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video. Smash that like and subscribe for a free Tesla. I love your faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.